Can you imagine negotiating a $100,000 payday with a single phone call? Well, you don't have to imagine anymore. You're going to get to hear it live.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
This is the Virtual Real Estate Investor Podcast with Vincent Polisi. Buckle your seatbelt and prepare to learn how to legally make six figures investing in real estate with no money, no credit check, and nothing but a computer and internet connection. Learn how you too can begin generating buyers and sellers for free today, and why you're only 2 calls away from making a $10,000 or more payday while never leaving the comfort of your home. And now, your host, the virtual real estate investor, Vincent Polisi.
All right, Investor Nation, here we go. Let's do this. Okay, if you've listened to the last 2 episodes, 003 and 004, you got to hear how we originated a $1.8 million lead for free on Craigslist. Then you got to hear the subsequent phone call with the seller who, as we found out in the call, turned out to be a future Hall of Fame Major League Baseball player. Now, if you recall, at the end of that phone call, the Major League Baseball player used what's called the appealing to the higher authority close. In that appealing to higher authority close, he wanted to speak to his financial advisor. And so at that point, I went ahead and said, let's go ahead and get him on the phone. We made that effort and unfortunately could not reach him on the phone at that point in time, but I did reach him on a subsequent conversation that you're about to hear. You're going to get to hear how I negotiate for a $100,000 plus payday with a single phone call. And if that wasn't enough, you're also going to get to hear the fact that I deserve the money. Before we dive into the call, I want to clarify a few things so that you'll understand how it's possible to negotiate this type of a payout in a single phone call. First and foremost, it's because the entire call, as you will hear, contains nothing but total transparency as to exactly what we're going to do. Unfortunately, that's not what's generally taught by most of the quote-unquote wholesale guru instructors out there selling courses, because typically what they're trying to get you to do is use what's called artifice or deception to contract on a property, not disclose who the parties are, not disclose what the intent is. And if you heard or have watched the YouTube video that the attorney for the National Real Estate Investors Association did just last week with the Ohio Department of Real Estate, what you will hear them say is that everything illegal that he brought up was really predicated off of transparency and intent. When you're doing deals, I cannot emphasize this enough. Don't conceal anything. It isn't necessary. If you can't buy a property, there's absolutely no shame in that. If that's not your intent, there's no shame in that. But don't portray yourself as something that you aren't. Do not contract on a property representing yourself as the buyer when you have absolutely no intention or ability to actually purchase the property. Don't do it. It's fraud. It's called fraud in the inducement. And if you utilized direct mail, postcards, yellow letters, any type of mail where you solicited people saying that you buy houses, you buy ugly houses, you pay cash for houses, and you don't, now you've committed mail fraud, as well as false advertising and deceptive practices. Don't do it. Don't listen to these guys teaching you to commit fraud just because they haven't been caught yet. It doesn't make it legal.
You think I'm talking about breaking the law?
No, I'm just trying to figure out how far you want it bent.
As far as you can without breaking it.
So let's talk about the law. As you're going to hear from this phone conversation, which was done prior to Dodd-Frank finally going into effect, the process that I used to utilize was optioning properties where it's fully disclosed that the intent is to obtain equitable interest in the property, that the seller is knowingly conveying equitable interest in the property so that I can not illegally broker without a license. Added to that is the fact that there's a clause in that option agreement that if any governing body deems that the contract is insufficient per their state law to have conveyed equitable interest, that the seller agrees in advance to help perfect the document to the satisfaction of the governing agency so that equitable interest is in fact conveyed. The purpose here, again, total transparency and to keep everything that's being done legal. So as you're going to hear in this call, everything that I'm doing is completely transparent and my intent is disclosed up front as to exactly what it is that I'm endeavoring to do with this transaction. The contracts express the exact same thing. Now, the process that I used for years prior to Dodd-Frank is a process that was developed along with a real estate litigator. The contracts that I used were prepared by a real estate attorney, and when I say real estate attorney, I'm talking about a real estate litigator. The reason that's important and an important distinction is because the average real estate attorney doesn't understand all of the claims and affirmative defenses that a defendant can bring up in a trial in the event that you ever end up in court. And so when you have your contracts prepared by a real estate attorney, you never want them prepared by the standard title agent real estate attorney that does closings. You want them prepared by the guy that goes into court every single day and battles eviction proceedings and other types of cases as they relate to real estate law. That's the guy that's going to have seen every possible argument presented. He's going to understand equitable interest. He's going to understand legal interest. He's going to understand how to keep you legal so that you don't have to worry about being arrested or prosecuted or censured by any government agency. So you understand, in addition to my contracts being actually prepared by a real estate litigator, I've actually also done deals with real estate attorneys that were also investors on their own property using my contracts and process. I've done deals with new construction builders represented by attorneys, with banks represented by attorneys on their entire REO portfolios. And in each and every case, they used my contracts and my process. My contracts have also been reviewed by several state attorney generals. Now, I'm going to knock on wood as I say this, but because of the complete transparency and because of the disclosed intent in what I'm doing, I have never been taken to court or prosecuted for any real estate transaction. And I want to make sure you aren't either, which is one of the reasons for this podcast, so that you can get legitimate, bona fide information not being sold to you by somebody whose only interest is in the mighty dollar. Now, while we're talking about the law, let's go ahead and talk about how it is I'm able to legally record these phone conversations. This is extremely important, so pay attention. Just because Google Voice and other applications enable you to click a button and record a phone call does not make it legal where you are. You must understand the state and federal wiretapping laws. In many states, you must have one or two party consent in order to record the phone call. In some states, there is no consent required. For the phone calls that I do, one of two things has happened. Either I'm in a state that doesn't require any additional consent, I have consent, or they've called through our PBX system and been notified up front in advance that all calls are recorded for quality assurance, training, and marketing purposes. Now, if you're unsure whether or not you can legally record calls in the state that you're in, just go to virtualrealestateinvestor.org and search for the post titled, Can I Record Calls? virtualrealestateinvestor.org/can I record calls with hyphens in between each of the words.
Hey, what's up, investors? John Lee Dumas here, founder and host of Entrepreneur on Fire, awarded Best of iTunes 2013, and you're listening to the Virtual Real Estate Investor Podcast with my man, Vincent Polisi. Prepare to ignite.
And now, without further delay, it's unquestionably everyone's favorite segment of the Virtual Real Estate Investor Podcast with Vincent Polisi. It's time for an extra-large dose of total transparency. As you listen to Vincent live and in the trenches dodging bullets and grenades, while he's closing real buyers and sellers over the phone.
Brian?
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, this is Vincent Polisi. How are you?
Oh, hey, Vincent. Fine. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Did I catch you at a good time? I know you said you were going to be running some errands or something.
Yeah, I'm kind of in between, so we've got a little while. So, thanks for calling me back. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for. Go ahead.
Anyway, one is a friend of ours, and my wife and I are in the financial planning business. And, Juan had asked about, I guess, the lease option that you had proposed to him. Okay. So we just wanted to get a little information about it because the only thing that we had seen was, I guess, the one or two page agreement that you had shown him. I was just curious as to how this worked because it didn't it didn't have any of the details associated with it. So I just kind of wanted to, cross the T's and dot the I's if we could.
Yeah, I think what he may even be more interested in, quite frankly, is me helping him get into another property without him having to stroke out, $500,000 to $800,000 for a down payment on a conventional mortgage. I think he may be a little more interested in that. But let me walk you through, since you weren't party to the other conversation, how these things work. And before I get into all that, let me give you a little bit of background so this will make sense. I'm a real estate investor. I spent 12 years in mortgage banking, owned a mortgage company. I've been in real estate for more than 20 years. We've done a variety of deal types with a number of professional athletes, with a lot of high-income, high-net-worth individuals. I was a self-certified wealth preservation planner in a former life. And so I'm familiar sort of with how you guys are typically set up and what you're looking out for. And I know these guys get highly paranoid over getting raked over the coals, as unfortunately happens to so many of them through, bad counsel. But basically, here's the deal. I put a program together back in 2006 when I had a few houses in Atlanta that I was trying to sell, but I could not sell them because this was at the top of the market and right around the time that the mortgage industry imploded. And I basically ate on those properties. I was eating about $4,000 a month between the two of them. And after, I didn't want to rent the houses. I didn't want tenants in there destroying the homes. And I put together a program at that point in time after eating about $48,000 in payments to Bear Stearns and Wells Fargo that was designed to get people into properties that wanted to purchase but didn't qualify for financing at that moment in time. So they come in under basically it's a purchase contract, normally under a contract for deed, where there is no deed transference, but they're tattooed on from a standpoint of we have an actual purchase agreement as opposed to a lease option or a lease purchase, because those are throwaway contracts that never, 98% of the time, those things never close. And so what we do is we go right out of the gate where the buyer is actually purchasing the property. They're tattooed on the agreement. It's normally set up with a 24-month balloon where the buyer then must refinance and cash one out because he indicated he's got about $800,000 in equity in the house. So they would basically be normally it's under a 24-month balloon period before they would then cash him out at that point. And in the interim, they come into the house, they're taking over all the payments, all debt service, taxes, insurance, HOA dues, all maintenance, all repairs, any increases in taxes, insurance, if there are any. And we work to then get them qualified for conventional financing. They get qualified, they close, and everybody, goes on down the road at that point. And I think, as I indicated, the deal with, Juan really sort of perked up when he found out not only that could we do that, but we could help him get into another property in Scottsdale that wouldn't require him to liquidate what I assume are brokerage accounts with you to fund, 30% down that a lender is going to want on a type house that I'm sure he's going to be looking to get into. So I think we have basically the way the conversation went from my understanding, because he wanted to get together sometime this week when he gets back from LA, was that he's interested in, trying to move forward to not only market his house because he's already got it listed for rent and for sale, but also in the prospect of us trying to help him get into something where he's not having to, and I don't know what your feelings are on equity, but I'm not a fan of equity and never have been. It's a great insurance policy for the banks, but it can evaporate overnight like it did here in Arizona a few years back. So basically what he had intimated was that he'd rather have the funds, I guess, invested with you where they can generate a rate of return as opposed to negative returns on equity. So are you looking to do? So just, I guess, to help me out with this, sure. If you find somebody that wants to get into one's current house, then right. What kind of on the pricing of this? Are they buying the house based on today's price or a future price, or how do you determine the pricing on that, Vincent? He had it listed for 1.9, and he's not getting any hits because I think he's unfortunately outpriced for the market based on the comps, because the comps that are out there are going to be short sales or foreclosures with banks in most cases. And so the price that they come in on paper is going to be the 1.9 full retail price that he wants. And the 24-month term is designed, I don't know how familiar you are with the Phoenix market, but there was a 22% appreciation rate last year in Phoenix. Now, that sounds ridiculous and wonderful in theory, but you have to understand how far down it went. So the 22%, while great, is still, not all that ecstatic, but it is an upward trend right now. So the expectation is that, during that 24-month period that some of the other comps could sell and he could recover to be able to get the full amount out that he wants, which is the 1.9. Because he's got it listed now at a $100,000 price reduction with the realtor that has it listed.
And what happens 2 years from now, Vincent, if the house, because in order for the person that's moving in here to be able to refinance this thing in 2 years, when the balloon comes due, the house is going to have to appraise as something closer to 1.9 for them to get financing. Isn't that correct?
Of course.
And so what if the market does revert to 1.9? Because I don't remember talking to Juan about the pricing lately, but I thought my wife had mentioned that the comps were considerably different than the 1.9.
Considerably different, meaning lower?
Yeah, like maybe 1.1 or so.
Right. Yeah, that's probably accurate, again, based on foreclosure sales, which really are not retail arm's length transactions, but the banks are utilizing them in appraisals now, even though they aren't the traditional comp.
Yeah, the same thing is happening here. The pendulum has swung, and so the banks are circling the wagons. They're making it difficult for people. But if that continues, and so let's say that the comps get up to 1.5 or 1.6, then what happens 2 years from now? Because I'm assuming the people that you're putting in there either don't have the down payment now or don't have the credit now.
That would generally be, it would normally be one of those two on a thing like this. Because of the down payment, the bank is going to want probably 30% down in cash for a property that size. So, it may be a down payment scenario. It may be a credit scenario. Most of the people that are going, you have to understand the higher end, so it's taking more of a beating than the lower end. I got a deal that we're working on right now with just give you an example, in Atlanta on another property similar to this one, that the owner of the property is he works for the studio that did all the Swordfish and Face Off and all that stuff with John Travolta and Nicolas Cage, and he's got this white elephant in Atlanta that he's in sort of a similar scenario in, that he knows what the cost per square foot is to replace it and what it actually should appraise for, but it's not appraising, so he can't unload it at this point. So what he's looking to do with us, again, is buy time to allow the market to recover to the point that he can while somebody else is in there making payments. Now, to answer your question, Juan is in the driver's seat at that point, because that's the reason we're tattooing them on the contract up front at the $1.9 million. That's the purchase price. If they can't obtain financing because the property is not appraised, that means that Juan can't sell it to anybody for $1.9 million. Because no bank will finance it at that point, unless somebody comes in and pays cash, which I don't think is going to happen if it's not appraising. So what the options would be they just extend the existing contract. It could be B, they extend the existing contract and the buyers put down more in cash. It could be C, that if Juan has the equity, which he does, and he just decides he wants to get out because it's not doing what he wants, then he can, we can do an amendment to the contract and drop it down to the 1.5. And I would advise that, but if he wants to get the other, I guess it's 400,000 out, that's a possibility of something that can happen. He can lower it and they can close, or they can meet in the middle somewhere where the buyer brings in more cash and Juan cuts the price and they meet in the middle someplace and he gets out from underneath it. So there's any number of scenarios. The key thing is that if we have the price at 1.9 and the balloon pops and they don't close at 1.9, control goes back to Juan at that point as far as what he wants to do. The obvious, an intelligent decision, if you're asking me as an investor, is, well, if I can't sell a property and I've got somebody in there making the payments, the obvious thing is to let them stay in there and keep making the payments. I got another property in Atlanta that's in a, the seller was a sports announcer for 25 years in Atlanta, and he has a house in a gated golf course subdivision. And basically what we did on that deal was, if the property did not appraise for what he wanted, because we put it's called a floor in place to make sure, because he's basing it off of future appraised value instead of an actual static price, because he wanted to obtain or scoop any additional upside potential that he could. And we have a floor in place. And if the property didn't appraise and the guy wanted to, he'd be required to extend nonetheless, but we have a performance clause in there that the guy then has to bring in another $100,000 in cash, for the down payment. And it extends his contract out for, I think it's 36 more months. If I remember, it's about a year ago. So I think it's at about another 36 more months that he gets an extension for at that point. So the bottom line is, I'm not married to any contract structure, if that makes sense. I want to put together whatever makes sense for all parties. What I would normally do in this scenario is just hit the price at 1.9 on paper, because we put the buyer in the trees at that point, and we have, we've got wands in control, as I indicated, and then we get 12, 18, 24 months down the road, and we can reassess the situation. And if it calls for a conference call, and we say, okay, here's where we're at. What does everybody want to do? Well, he's in the driver's seat, so he can make that determination at that point in time, because effectively their contract is breached. So, it's entirely up to him what they want to do, or what he wants to do.
Yeah, because I guess one of the things I was unclear about on the paperwork that you had given him, I was really unclear as to who was in control, whether you were in control or Juan was in control.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, I apologize for what you have. Let me explain to you how we have to do this so that it makes sense. What you have, and I'm ashamed to see that you actually have, what you have is an extremely dumbed down option agreement. Okay. And it's dumbed down. I had one that's like 5 pages long and has all the legalese. It was prepared by the attorneys. And unfortunately, it just scares the living daylights out of people. And because Juan's never going to pay me any money on this deal, I'm not into this thing for any equity in the house or anything and stuff like that. All fees come in from the buyer. The objective is to do two things with that option agreement that you have. One is to identify the price and the payment, because if there's going to be an issue, it's generally going to be about the money, and I want to get that cleared up right out of the gate. And number two is to ensure that I am not illegally brokering without a license, because I'm not a realtor, and in order to be involved in a transaction that I don't own or don't have some type of, I'm not vested in equitable interest or title, I have to have an agreement with the seller of the house. So what I did a number of years ago was we just dumbed it down. We said, okay, you know what? I'm not going to sue anybody based on these things, because, if somebody doesn't want to do the deal, we're just going to walk away and get another house, because they're everywhere. So we just dumb it down to make it non-scary, for the average person. It's obviously, not designed to be reviewed by financial advisors who know what they're doing and are used to looking at 30-page contracts. But it's designed just to make it, we can change it any way you want. If you want to mark it up, that's fine if there's something you're concerned about. But what happens is this is a normal process. We have a buyer. The buyer goes out and sees the house. If they want to move forward at that point, then I pull the trigger with them on a standard lease option agreement. I go through the entire Q&A process with them to get all of their questions answered, all the payment price terms, everything else associated with the house, and then we get good funds in hand from them. At that point, I would notify Juan, hey, we've got an executed contract. I have good funds in hand. I'm exercising the option. And then I prepare an assignment agreement of all these contracts back to him. So he's in, he has all right, title, and interest in the contract, and, any and all future payments going forward for that particular deal. Then, okay, this is sort of where it's a little different than probably what you're used to. We're going to negate that contract, the lease option, because it's worthless. And we set up a contract for deed directly between Juan and the buyer. There's no third party involvement. It's directly between the two of them. And it's all predicated on the exact same payment and price. And that way he's got the bona fide purchase contract directly with them. I'm not involved in that. It's something we provide strictly as a courtesy, and that's the end contract that we're looking for him and for the buyer, quite frankly.
And this is all done before anybody moves in.
Oh yeah. It's all done before anybody moves in. He'll have money. Okay. He'll have funds in hand. He'll have funds from me before there's ever any transference of keys, garage door openers, utilities, insurance, anything. Everything's all done above board and with complete transparency.
So Vincent, when you say good funds in hand, can you define that? I mean, on Juan's house, what would you be requiring somebody to give you?
That's a very good question, and I'm going to probably have to. I got to think through that, because let me explain to you what the variables are, so this makes sense. If I don't know what your familiarity is with mortgages, but because the end here is set up to have the buyer qualified and closing on a mortgage, what that means is that they're going to have to come in somewhere between 20 and 30% down in cash, or have a combination of that and equity in the home when they refinance it. Because technically, and this gets a little confusing for some people, the deed is not conveying now. Okay, Juan retains the deed. We do it that way on purpose, just to make sure we don't have to go through the judicial foreclosure process in the event something goes upside down for him to get the deed back. Okay, so that being said, because it's classified, because the contracts we utilize they were put together to be in compliance with the IRS's installment sales contract guidelines. And from the buyer's perspective, even though they're not on the deed, they technically become the legal owner of the property on paper from a tax deductibility perspective. What happens when they go to get mortgage financing is they are not getting a purchase money mortgage, because they cannot purchase what they already, technically on paper own. Okay. Even though there's been no record. So they refinance it. And the reason that's important, if you understand how the lenders are set up, is that on a purchase, if you go buy a house, you personally, you have to come in with a down payment. If you refinance a house, and they don't base it off of the purchase price, it's predicated off of the appraised value of the property. So if the home appraises for more than what the original purchase price was, and that's enough to cover all or a portion of, it's not down payment at that point, it's called the LTV or loan to value, then hypothetically, theoretically, the buyer has to bring either no or less funds to the table to close that transaction. But anyway, to answer your question, right. On a deal like this, we're probably going to be looking for, six figures at a minimum. We got to have somebody with some glue that's not going to go in there and we have to worry about them tearing the house apart and doing all that. And they have to have a scenario where they have a financial ability during the contract term to make up the difference between whatever they come in with initially and whatever a lender would require. Because if they can't do that, they can't close. So
are the lease payments allocated towards building equity? Do you give them credit for that, or how does that work?
No. Yeah, and it's not a lease. Remember, it's a purchase. Okay, so the way he's actually going to be it's an owner finance mortgage. So I set it up as interest only and property taxes for two reasons. Number one, I don't know what kind of loan he's got on the house now, but typically the average seller is going to reap, money in addition to, or a benefit in addition to the monthly payment, because they're getting amortization on the loan. So they're getting the principal balance, reduced.
Right.
And additionally, from the buyer's perspective, those are the only two things that are tax deductible for the buyer. So it just sort of made sense on all sides to make sure that, Juan's not getting his principal balance, or let me rephrase that. He's not giving credit against the purchase price for each payment. It's interest only and property taxes. That's it.
Okay. So Juan is actually holding the paper on this.
Yeah, it's not any. When you say that,
that's pretty what, like owner financing. So the guy comes in and Juan's basically making the loan.
Yeah, let me clarify this so we don't get into the typical confusion that people have, because people hear owner financing and that means different things to different people. So I'd like to understand what that means to you, so hopefully we can, remain on the same page. Because whether it's a lease option, a lease purchase, a contract for deed, a land contract, a title holding trust, a subject to deal, whatever, the bottom line is Juan has a mortgage. He's got payments he has to make. Even if he puts a straight renter in there, which he's got it advertised as a straight renter right now, it's an owner finance deal. He's the owner and he's financing somebody to be in the property. Okay. Mm-hmm. Where I want to make sure we don't have any confusion on is there is no deed conveyance on this, like there is on a traditional vanilla, what most people think of as an owner finance contract. Okay. Mm-hmm. He maintains the deed. Otherwise, to me, it doesn't make any sense. So it's not going to look, act, or feel any different than him signing a lease agreement with somebody. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. The difference is that the incoming buyer, from Juan's perspective, it's a much better deal financially because he's on a lease, you cannot defer, especially in Arizona, defer or deflect maintenance and repairs onto a tenant. It's illegal. You can't do that, okay? I'm sure people do it all the time, but it won't hold up in court if they take it to court. So what happens then is he has the mitigated risk of potential maintenance and repair expenses associated with the property for whatever period of time he has a renter in there, which he has it advertised as a rental right now. That's how we found him to begin with, okay? Mm-hmm. And under this deal, based on the IRS's installment sales contract guidelines, the buyer must maintain every responsibility that a traditional owner would have on a house if they went and paid cash or if they had a mortgage. So the buyer has to take care of maintenance and repairs. And so Juan, if he's got, I think he said he's looking for $7,000 a month, which to me is low, personally, for the size house. Mm-hmm. But let's just say we go with that number. With my deal, he can expect that statically on a monthly basis, so he knows exactly what he's got coming in, as opposed to if he rents it or he does a lease option or a lease purchase where it's a straight tenancy agreement, he's going to be on the hook for maintenance and repair issues. Okay,
so Vincent, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was done.
Well, I was just curious. So the new buyer, the renter, whatever you want to call this person, they have to come up with 6 figures as some kind of a down payment. Where does that go? Who gets that?
Well, that's, again, because we're not participating in his equity in the house, nor are we participating in any monthly payments or cash flow or charging any type of an upfront fee. That is generally where our funds come from for handling everything for him.
And how much of that would you normally charge?
100%.
100%? So yep. whatever the down payment is, you get then, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, they're not going to give me $300,000 in cash if that's what you're asking, or $500,000 or anything like that. That's not what we're doing.
Right.
Because I have to. Go ahead.
You say it's likely to be 6 figures, though, correct?
Well, I don't know how we're going to do it any other way. I mean, if somebody comes in with $50,000, I mean, they can do $50,000 worth of damage really quickly. And the way these deals work, as we explained to him, I believe we did to him the other day, I indemnify these deals against buyer default and any damage to the property. So unlike, where he has a renter that comes in and tears the house apart and leaves in the middle of the night, and, he has to fight to evict and get out, and they're there with missed payments for 3 months. In these scenarios, I indemnify against all that so that he is maintained and he's kept whole if that situation were to happen with our buyer, because I'm going to be the one that's going to be covering that.
Okay. But just thinking through the numbers, if someone is going to do this and they're going to give you 6 figures up front, and that is supposed to, I guess, in theory, build some equity for them, because then you said, I think, on the back end, I think it was whatever they put down plus their equity is how they qualify for the mortgage on the back end. Is that right? So if you're
Correct.
taking if you're taking everything that they're putting in the front end, then that means that the only way that they're going to build equity is if the market goes up in the meantime. Is that correct or not? Am I misunderstanding something?
The only way it's just like a traditional sale. The only way they're building equity is if they pay money down or if there's appreciation.
Right, but the money that they paid down, in theory, goes to you, and I'm not quibbling on that. I'm just saying that's just a fact.
Yeah.
That's off the table. So basically, in order to do this, whatever money is going to you, assuming one found somebody that could buy the house for the same dollar amount in 2 years, that's money. That's what one is paying, really.
That's what one is paying. I'm not following you. Say it one more time.
So let's say the house is selling for 1.9, and somebody's going to give you $100,000 to get into this deal, and now they have 2 years in order to come up with the money or the financing for the 1.9.
Right.
So they've given you $100,000, and then 2 years down the road they have to finance this. Then I guess what I'm trying to get at is they're going to have to come up with another $100,000 to make up for the $100,000 that they've already put down, plus use any equity build up in the meantime to qualify. Is that right? They do not have the money they've given you to qualify.
Yeah, I understand where you're going now. The answer to that is no, and a missing component in this is that if you understand options and arbitraging deals, basically we option a property for what's called the strike price, and let's just say he's got it for I think it's 1.7 is what he's got it listed for right now. So whatever that number is, then what I'm going to do is we mark it up based on the amount of the down payment, and that becomes the purchase price to the buyer. What happened?
One is the same.
Correct, exactly right. But it's two things. The net to one is exactly the same, and the buyer gets credit for the amount of money that they have paid down, assuming, obviously, that everything appraises okay.
Well, I'm a little confused. How do they get the credit for let's say it's $100,000. How do they get credit for that?
They get credit for it against the principal balance. Let's say the number. That's the number. That's what he's got it listed for, I think. It's either 1.7 or 1.8. But anyway, let me just use 1.7. If that's the number, and the price I give to them is 1.8, and we put a credit in there for their down payment, legitimately of $100,000, they get credit for that when they get their financing, because it's legitimate cash that's paid in, and it's done that way on purpose because what typically happens on a lease option deal, if you understand the mechanics of that, on a standard lease option, let me give you a legitimate scenario. I have an investor that was my next door neighbor, and they bought these properties down at Centennial Olympic Park. And he couldn't sell them, and he was asking me what I thought he should do. And I said, I think they should probably do a lease option deal. Well, they had these two guys that came in that owned a limo company, and they gave them $50,000 down as an option on a 6-month option on the house, and then took the payments over for that period of time. And my neighbor was like, yeah, he says, I don't care if they close or not. He says, if they don't close, I got $50,000. He says, if they do close, then I had somebody in there making the payments, and we make our full profit. The average investor is in these deals to knock somebody's head off, and there is no concern whether or not there's ever an eventual closing. That's all they want to do is just make their money up front and get out. I put these deals together with the end in mind because I was the very first one. I was trying to get rid of two houses I couldn't sell either, and it wasn't for lack of buyers coming into the property. It was for lack of anybody's ability to get financing because the lenders, this is going back 6 years ago, had literally imploded the market. So when I put everything together, I mean, he's getting, my contracts that I put together to protect me and the contract structure and the flow that's designed to get somebody qualified in the shortest possible time frame. Because I'm assuming he wants that $800,000, yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I guess the one question would be, and this goes to the example you just gave, if you are making your money up front and clients ask me this all the time too, Vincent. So please don't be offended by this. But well, what is
I know where you're going.
Keeps you, what is it that keeps you interested in this thing to make sure it does go through the full cycle?
Because I don't have time, quite frankly, for a nasty phone call from Juan. And I'll tell you how these things typically end up going. What generally ends up happening in scenarios like this, because it's happened to me before, because I've done things for numerous NFL guys. I've done stuff for people in Hollywood and all that. And I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm just telling you that's the nature of the people that end up coming to us for some of this type stuff, because the high end has been more damaged than the lower end, and very few people know how to structure these types of things. But what generally happens is, I mean, and you know this, I mean, if you're in the business, how many, I don't know, do you have strictly sports guys? Is that your book of business, or do you have run across the board?
No. We have some sports guys, but most of our business is just, I would say that, the average client we have has a net worth of, $2 million or north of that probably, but, not super wealthy people.
Okay. Well, here's what generally happens with the sports guys. Okay. Once you've done a deal with one of them and they haven't gotten screwed, they start referring all their buddies, and it becomes a very, very lucrative proposition once you get, into the network, so to speak. And that's the way it's been. That's the way it's been for me every time I've ever done a deal for any of the NFL guys, or for, same thing with some of the directors and stuff that we've done stuff for. They, all of a sudden you get these phone calls out of the blue. Hey, so and so told me to call you, and so you end up. And your question is legitimate, because I mean, there's nothing legally, technically binding us to do anything, but it's simply not good business. I mean, I'm not going to leave him hanging the bag. The last thing I need this guy to do is jump on the internet and start raising hell, saying that, we put a ringer in his house and destroyed the property and all that. I mean, what is that going to do for our business? I don't need that. And so, we have a tendency to be married to these deals from start to finish, because it's simply good business, not for any other reason, other than it's just good business. And in this case, especially, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to lie to you. I want to do this deal with him because of the potential opportunities that are out there, for other high-end deals like this, because, he's not alone in the fact that obviously he's gotten accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and, the banks right now are interested in protecting themselves to the point that they want all his money to get into another house that is consistent with what he's trying to do. And let me tell you something up front too, so this makes sense. I didn't know who this guy was when we got him on the phone. Okay. I mean, we had this conversation, and I mean, he's just some guy I'm talking to on the phone, and we're about 25, 30 minutes into the conversation about to call you. And I start making fun of him because he doesn't know how to do a conference call on his phone. I said, "What do you do for a living?" He says, I take a bat and I hit a ball with it. He says that I'm very good at that. So, then we started connecting the dots and looked him up and all that. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's who this is. This is it's not some sort of staged thing. It's just a very interesting conversation that we had the other day. And I think what it does is it solves two problems that he has. And I think it solves, potentially some problems for you, in the sense that, one, for him anyway, he gets the ability to, because he's not going to sell the house at 1.7 right now. We all know that. He and I had that conversation the other day. Not because the house isn't nice, but just, the banks are pretty much not going to allow it based on the way they have things set up. So he gets somebody in his property. They've got all the coverage. He gets out, because I know he said that he and his wife are getting tired of, driving from Peoria all the way over to Scottsdale, and for the kids for a private school or something. And so we get somebody in there to take care of that. I can get him into something else here where he's not having to liquidate assets with you to come in for a down payment. We can affect that typically very quickly, just like with a phone call like this one. And so we kill two birds with one stone there. We leave his funds with you. And it's, I don't know who your other clients are, but it also, I'm assuming you're paid on money under management, but maybe you're not. it also opens up, some other potential opportunities for some of your other clients to not have to do the exact same thing. Because I wouldn't personally go give a bank $750,000 down on the house. There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just wouldn't do it. I don't think it makes any type of sense personally. I mean, if you read that, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying. I mean, I don't know if you follow the thing with Shaquille O'Neal on Star Island and that property he was trying to get. I mean, he got just taken to the cleaners on that house that he had down there, and that's typically what happens, in a lot of these scenarios. It's not necessary. You don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this: where do you find your people, Vincent? Do you advertise? You have a network of people that are looking for higher end homes, or where can you find somebody that one is not going to be able to find them?
Where can I find somebody that one's not going to be able to find them? I've been doing this. I've got about 5,000 people in an active database, plus, as I indicated, the other high income, high net worth individuals that we've done deals with, in our network beforehand. And so what happens is it becomes sort of like a spider's web that goes out when we start marketing, because I can blast everything out in an email, and we start instantly getting hits on people that are looking for this type of opportunity. Because, see, you got to understand, the average person is not going to come in and do a lease option on a deal like this, because, they're looking for the tax benefits and they want to have ownership in the house and be able to do things the right way. I mean, he's got it advertised right now for rent, and he hasn't rented it. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's a reason.
For obvious reasons, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
How long does it normally take you to, from start to finish, to put a deal like this together?
Well, if we have a buyer and we can get access to the house, and I know I guess he's coming back Monday or Tuesday. Is that, if I understood that correctly?
I think so, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, if we have, once we have the buyer that's ready to go pull the trigger and we can coordinate getting into the property, they see the house and they say, we're ready to go. I mean, that deal's locked up that day. They wire the funds and, we move forward. It doesn't have to take an elongated period of time. Now, if for whatever the reason the house doesn't work and I've got to go to work and market it to get somebody else in here, then, it could take a few weeks. But all that while, keep in mind, I'm not trying to hamstring him. My deal is non-exclusive. If he sells it for 1.9 between now and then, fine, great. I mean, I hope that's what happens, honestly, from his perspective, because that would be the him. Doesn't stop him from renting the house, selling the house, doing anything. It's I produce or I don't get paid.
So if just since you just made that point, so let's say that you find somebody, you put them in, and a year down the road, things turn around and one does want to sell the house to somebody else. Can he get out of the contract that he has with a current renter or buyer at that time?
Yes and no. I'll tell you a situation that we did on a deal in Atlanta where we had a buyer that went into a property, and I think it was a year into the deal, and he had a job opportunity where he could get transferred in his current job and get a higher pay and set up in Florida. And in that situation, basically what we did is we just had a conversation with the seller. And this is a reverse, I think, from what you're talking about. I've never had a seller want to sell it to somebody else. Are you suggesting that you're thinking that you could get a qualified buyer that would want to buy it before the person we put in?
Yeah.
And that way he could get his
if the market changes.
Yeah, we can. I mean, we can certainly put in we can make it with what's called an ROFR, a right of first refusal clause, where, I have to think that I probably have to get with the attorneys to figure out how to put that in so it makes sense. But essentially what would happen is they could be forced to refinance with, X number of days notice in the event that there was somebody else that came in with, proof of funds and a qualification letter and all that stuff and an ability to close within a specified time frame. It's what's called a kick-out clause. And that could certainly be put in if you think that could be a possibility.
Well, I'm not suggesting it can be. I'm just thinking that if I'm just thinking in terms of this new person that's moving in is writing a check, let's just say for $100,000, and that goes to you, and and so their liquid cash is now mostly gone. And then Juan comes back 6 months later. Let's say we're into this, and Juan says, "We have the right of first refusal. You either do this or you're out." I don't think the people are going to be very happy because they wrote a check for $100,000, and now they're not going to have an opportunity to have that house.
Well, let me clarify a few things for you real quick. I'm not putting somebody in the house and taking $100,000 if $100,000 is all they have. We have to leave them with reserves, and more than likely what we would end up doing in this scenario, just to give everybody some peace of mind, is paying several months of the payments in advance or having them held in escrow with you or an attorney or something like that so they're released on time. So I don't ever, you got to understand something. I don't want a nasty phone call from you. I don't need an attorney calling me. I don't need Juan calling me upset. I don't need you guys getting on the internet and doing all kinds of crazy stuff that people do. So I'm not going to put a ringer in the property that is going to be in a position where if something happens, they're going to default. That's not what we're looking for.
No, I understand that, and none of us are looking for. I want my life to be simple, not complex. Sure. But I'm just thinking from the new person's perspective. Whatever the size of the check they write, based on what you told me about the option of this thing, because they think they're buying it 1.8, but they now paid it down to 1.7. They really think that they have equity in this thing, even
Sure.
though they really don't. And
let me tell you. Yeah, let me tell you what I do. Let me explain this so this makes sense. Because we run into this sometimes. It's a little different, but it's somewhat similar, and hopefully this will help make you see how it can work. We get people sometimes they're on the cusp of qualifying for financing, and they have plenty of cash. Cash is not the issue; it's stupid credit score that they need to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because they're so close, 3, 4, 5, 6 months out, they don't want to pay retail. Okay, so they don't want to come to me and pay retail for Juan's house. They want me to contract on either a short sale or a foreclosure for them with a bank. And so what we've done in other scenarios is this. And when you talk about things getting a little hairy and people moving forward, let me walk you through this real quick. On a short sale, what happens is I go in and I contract to purchase the property. The buyer comes in and they're paying me money down up front because I have to have earnest money down when I contract on the house. And I'm not going to go through the short sale process and all the hell that's involved in that without, substantial good funds in hand from a buyer, because it's an aggravation and exercise in futility, the likes of which you've never seen when you're dealing with the bank's loss mitigation department. And so they come in with money, and we have them sign 27 different disclosures, disclaimers, waivers of liability, hold harmless agreements, total transparency, et cetera, that they understand two things. Basically, that we're working to negotiate the short sale, and there is no guaranteed time frame as to when that short sale will be negotiated, because I can't control that. There's no guarantee that we'll be effective in negotiating the short sale, because neither I or anybody else can control that. The bank can do pretty much whatever they want to do and just say, to hell with it, we're going to foreclose. Okay? And so they go into the property and start making payments predicated on those two understandings. Now, what we do is we utilize those two things as essentially, performance incentives to get them motivated to get qualified in the shortest possible time frame. Because the way I structure the deal is this: if they are not qualified by the time the short sale is negotiated, what happens then is we'll partner with another investor who will close in cash on that deal. But then they lose the discount position. They don't get the house at a discount at that point. They're paying full retail because the other investor that we bring in, he's got to make his money someplace, and he's going to make his money through cash flow, because he's going to have to put 20% down, and through an actual retail price. So we use that as, basically lighting a fire under them to get them qualified as quickly as possible. Now, the other thing is that if they do qualify, then we just assign our interest to them, and they close on our position, and they have the ability to get the property at a discount. if the property, let's say that, and we have this in the agreements because everything, like I said, is above board. Let's say we get into this thing and it's 8 months down the road and they have money down with us, and for whatever reason, the bank simply will not they will not negotiate the short sale. They decide that they want to move forward with foreclosure, which can happen. Okay, they don't have to negotiate a short sale with anybody. And say they say, the hell with it, we're just going to go ahead and foreclose. Then at that point, it's decision time, and the buyers know this stuff up front. They know that they could be in a capacity once the house forecloses that the bank's going to come after them for an eviction at that point. And so, do I just allow them to lose the money down that they've had? I went, no, of course not. We put them in another house. Okay, and the reason that we do that is because it's simply good business. Okay, and here's the problem is this. Okay, you're probably not used to people doing things straight up because there's so much fraud out there and everybody's trying to stick everybody else, especially in this economy. But the reason I've been able to, build the business that we've got and deal with the caliber of clientele that we've dealt with is because we're not out there sticking knives in people's backs and twisting them because we can. That's very short-sighted, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, it's hard to argue with that, but you and I both know that sometimes the people that profess to be the most honest, are not. And I'm not saying that you're not, Vincent. So please don't take it that way. It's just that I'm over here and you're over there, and Juan's a good guy, and he's he trusts everybody, type of thing. And his baseball playing days are behind him, so his peak earning years are behind him, unfortunately.
Sure.
And
right.
Like you pointed out before, he's now in a position where he is used to a certain lifestyle that he probably cannot afford. So we're just trying to help him transition through that, as best he can. And obviously, we don't want him to get burned. Doesn't seem like anything you've suggested would say that he's going to get burned, but we just want to be careful. Let me ask you one other quick question, because you talked about helping him get into another house. Would you put him in another house in the same way you would put someone in his house?
If I understand the question correctly, yeah. I mean, we just negotiate. We find a property that matches what he's looking for, negotiate the contract, and get him in. I think that's what he wants.
Would it be done under any kind of exchange, like a 1031 exchange or anything like that? I don't think you can do that on the personal real estate, can you?
Not on a personal real estate. He's got right now. That is his primary residence. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is.
So he's got the capital. He's got the capital gains exclusion up to $500,000 on that anyway. But as it relates to him getting into another property, I'm not sure what you're asking me. If we're going to try to hammer him for $100,000 too, is that what you're asking me?
Well, I'm just asking how you would get him in another property because I don't know what price range he would be looking at. But if he can't get the equity out of the one he has now, then how would you put him in another one?
I just put him in another one. I mean, it's not a. I don't need to. If you're asking me if I have some need to double dip, my double dip with him, quite frankly, instead of him having to come in and pay. I don't know what he's looking for, but instead of him having to come in and pay a tremendous amount of money, if we are able to pull this off on his house, I have made more than enough in that scenario that I need to be able to help him get into another house. And I would do a goodwill deal in, quite frankly, if you want transparency, quite frankly, and hopefully that, he'll tell some of his friends.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, great. Well, listen, I appreciate the education. It's been a learning experience. so thank you for sharing that with me.
It's my pleasure.
I'll talk to Juan, and then we'll see where he wants to go from here. But like I say, thanks for being so upfront. And I may have some other questions afterwards if you don't mind. So maybe I can call you back if I do.
By all means. Like I said, I told him on Friday when I left him a voicemail message. Then he got before he called me back that I was heading out to take the kids down to the indoor trampoline jump place I got here in Scottsdale. And I took them down. And the reason you guys both called me back that afternoon, and I had no idea, based on your voicemail, I thought you said 4:00 Friday, and then you were going to be gone. I had no idea you were going to be calling me back yesterday. And you called me back. We had the kids at Monsters Inc. or whatever, Monsters University. The movie.
How was that, by the way? Was that a good movie?
Yeah, it was good. I don't know. My kids they're 7, 8, and 3 months, and they all seem to be very satisfied and had a good time.
That's good. That's good. We took our young nieces to Monsters Inc. when it first came out, and I thought it was really well done. They seemed to get a kick out of it. So
yeah,
it's probably better than some of the other crap that's coming out of Hollywood these days.
There's no doubt. This is actually a prequel to that one that showed how Sully and whatever his name, Mike, got together and all the struggles they went through and all that. So it was fairly entertaining. The kids liked it because they like to watch them as kids and teenagers and all that stuff.
Right, sure. Right. Well, listen, I like I say, I appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday afternoon, and I'll be talking to you again probably. But thanks again.
Okay. My pleasure. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Virtual Real Estate Investor Podcast with Vincent Polisi. If you found any value in this podcast, please use our Give to Get method and take a moment to give us a 5-star rating in iTunes and your favorite podcast service so we can keep giving you excellent episodes of real content you can use to profit today.